Good morning, and welcome to a new episode of Meatpacking Unpacked, Community Connected, brought to you by the Meatpacking District. My name is Jeffrey LeFrancois, and I'm the Executive Director of the Meatpacking Business Improvement District. This past week, besides being, one of excitement for some, tumult for others, was also New York's Champagne Week. Champagne Week was started by Blaine Ashley in 2013, and every November, Blaine and team host several champagne parties and seminars. Since its inception, Champagne Week has been exclusive to the food and beverage, trade, media, and industry leaders. This year, of course, was different. But today, I'm joined by Courtney McKamey to get her thoughts on the bubbly drink. Courtney is a bartender by trade, baker by blood, and a wine enthusiast by nature. She is the owner of the Cocktail Parlor, the manager of Little West Wine and Spirits on Little West 12th Street in the Meatpacking District. Her favorite wine is a Burgundy Pinot Noir, and we're going to learn a whole lot more about her and champagne today. Hi, Courtney. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Jeffrey. Nice to see you.
You too. So, champagne, Prosecco, Cava, everybody's got a bubbly. Let's just start with what makes champagne and champagne special.
Of course. So champagne is all regionally named. So just like Cava, just like Prosecco, it's all to do with the specific region. So Champagne in France, or Champagne, is all these different producers that create a really phenomenal sparkling wine. So they use primarily 3 grapes and either choose different percentages or 100% percentage of that grape. So you'll see Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. And it kind of ranges in flavor profile depending on the specific percentage of each varietal. However, you end up having almost always this exceptionally dry and really tight bubbles within the carbonation of each champagne, which is what makes champagne so great. And it's also coming from these really old vines planted in the Champagne region. So the older the vine, the more depth each grape has. So, for example, if you have a champagne from an older producer, like Pierre Gimonet.
I have that one too.
Yes. Their vines are significantly older than, let's say, Veuve Clicquot. Veuve Clicquot is more of like a newer champagne producer. So that wine is going to taste completely different. It's just going to have less depth. Even if it's made with the same grapes, which it's not, it's going to just be totally different. So what I mean by depth is I mean more of a body. And what I mean by that, even with Chardonnay, which is normally a lighter bodied grape in general, you end up having this really rich, really lovely sparkling wine that ends up having all of these different flavor profiles to them that make them all exceptionally unique.
You mentioned that one of the grapes would be a Pinot Noir, yet many of us associate champagne as being a white sparkling wine. So how does it go from coming from a grape that we would typically correlate with a red wine to being what makes a champagne?
So have you heard of skin contact wine?
Sure.
So normally you hear that term with orange wine, but same kind of idea with making a white wine or a lightly colored sparkling wine with traditionally dark grapes. So the skin of the grape, of Pinot Noir grape specifically, is taken off before maceration. So you end up just getting the flesh of the grape, and the flesh of the grape is lightly colored. So it's the skin of the grape that gives the wine a dark color. So you'll have a Pinot Noir from Burgundy, if you will, which is my favorite. And it's going to be this really dark purple hue. And that's coming from not only the flesh and the maceration process, but it's from the skin of that grape.
Got it. Okay. So it's a process that the grape goes through even before it sort of begins turning into wine.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. All right, let's try some of these champagnes that we have today.
Yes.
And then we'll talk about some holiday cocktail parlor cocktail things. That sound good?
That sounds
Right.
great.
In restaurants, or wherever, sometimes you're not supposed to pop the cork. What's the
You're
best
not
way to
supposed
open a bottle of champagne?
So I always open the foil. I've already opened both my bottles. So you want to take the foil off gently.
Yep.
And there should be a place.
Yeah, there's always a tab on it somewhere.
Exactly. So there's always a tab to make it significantly easier for you to actually open. The only champagne that I've ever come into contact with that doesn't have a tab to make life easier is Dom Perignon, for the sake of being obnoxiously difficult.
I was going to say, they do it on
Comes
purpose.
off in these teeny tiny flakes, which is just delightful when you just want a glass of champagne.
I'm going to open Perignon. Is it
Gimonet?
Gimonet first?
Wonderful.
Or should I got to open them both because we're going to talk about them both. So
Yeah. So exactly. So what I do is I put the bottle at an angle slightly, and then I hold on to the cork with my whole hand.
Yep.
And then just add slightly unscrewing pressure. So I'm holding it and then I'm slightly unscrewing it like I would like a door handle.
Yep.
And then you're going to hear a little bit of a fizz, and you're going to lightly help the cork exit the bottle. And then you're going to slightly turn it so that more air escapes. Exactly.
So you want to hear that little fizz, and then you turn to sort of help it release.
Exactly.
That was the quietest bottle I've ever opened. So I'm going to do that from now on.
Yeah.
And why do we open it slowly?
So you want to open it slowly so that not more than the carbonation that should be coming out leaves the bottle. Because if you let it pop, the wine's going to fall flat.
Got it. When do the bubbles go into the wine? When does that happen?
So after distillation, then the carbonation comes into play, because you can't add the carbonation during maceration or even during distillation, because it just ends up messing with the flavor profile of the wine.
Okay. As I told you before we started recording, I have rocks glasses, not flutes today.
That is okay. I will show you how to swirl either way.
Okay.
So have you poured the Gimonet?
There it goes.
Wonderful. Beautiful. All right. So even though this is a sparkling wine, champagne specifically, you're still going to swirl it slightly because you want to take a deep breath into the glass to get all of the notes it has to offer.
Lovely.
So this one specifically is one of my favorites. It's 100% Chardonnay, which is a very classic, just Blanc de Blanc champagne. So Blanc de Blanc, meaning that it's 100% Chardonnay.
Got it.
So in the nose, I'm getting more notes of green apple, Meyer lemon, and almost like it's kind of yeasty too. So it almost
does have a yeastiness at the end, I feel like. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. It kind of reminds me of like a sourdough lemon pound cake, if you can imagine that. And when you're ready, take a sip.
Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah, and it's
now,
clean,
I do not like Chardonnay typically. Why is this enjoyable? And yet a bottle of Chardonnay I might not find, like, I just don't typically enjoy. A steel barrel, I prefer that over an oak barrel Chardonnay. But
gotcha.
This is really lovely and very dry.
Mm-hmm. So for the most part, champagne is made in steel barrels. So it leads to this really bright crispness, which is wonderful. The reason why you might like this as opposed to a standard bottle of still Chardonnay, it could be a combination of things. It could be a combination of the fact that it is sparkling and it is dry and it is made in steel barrels, so it has that classic crispness. Or it could also pertain to the age of the vines that the grapes are grown on.
Okay.
Older vines lead to higher end wine. This is also a Premier Cru champagne. So what that means is that it's coming from vineyards that have been deemed highly acceptable. So not quite Grand Cru. Grand Cru is like the highest possible tier of champagne you can find. Premier Cru is just one notch down, but like still
not a gold, but a silver. Still a strong contender. Okay.
Exactly.
Is it a new or an old vintage that you drink when you drink champagne? Obviously, you can drink them at all ages, but sort of typically off the shelf. Is this something that ages a while before it's turned into put in a glass?
Not necessarily. So what's really nice about champagne is that it's pretty much ready to drink at any age. So these specifically are non-vintage champagnes. So what that means is that it's several different years of harvests that go into one barrel, and it ends up becoming a blend of various vintages, which is how it's deemed as a non-vintage.
Got it.
So those are always ready to drink. However, if you end up finding a bottle of champagne with an actual vintage on it, you can age it for a few years. It depends on the producer, but I wouldn't age champagne more than maybe 5 to 10 years. Only because the carbonation in the bottle could significantly change. However, there are a few vintages that stick out astonishingly well. So, for example, the Krug 2005 vintage and the 2003 vintage are phenomenal. But they also come with like a $500 price point. So that's not everyday drinking champagne.
No, that certainly isn't. I mean, that's 17 and 15 years old. So I mean, that really has some age behind it too.
Yeah. And they do exceptionally well. But Krug is also a Grand Cru vineyard. So they have the oldest vines, and they also have the most sought after wines too.
Okay. All right. What's our second bottle here?
So our second bottle is the Gaston Chiquet.
Okay.
So we are trying two completely different champagnes today. They are perfect exemplifications of the Champagne region though. So we have the 100% Chardonnay. Gaston Chiquet is a blend of Pinot Meunier, Pinot Noir, and Chardonnay. So it's 40% Pinot Meunier, 35% Chardonnay, and 25% Pinot Noir. So what you get is a very different champagne from the Pierre Gimone.
Okay.
It has a little bit more depth to it because that was a great fizz. I heard that.
Little pop. I tried.
That was perfect.
Thanks.
So you have a champagne that has a little bit more depth to it, a little bit more body because it is using those heavier grapes. But as soon as you pour it, you'll see the color is slightly different, but still on the lighter side. So it has more of like this golden hue, whereas the Pierre Gimone has more of a bright yellow hue.
Yeah, definitely. This is lighter.
Yeah. So when you're ready.
Okay.
Have a swirl.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This one's more like notes of apricot and white peach. So you're still getting those really lovely fruit notes, but you're not necessarily getting the citrus-based fruit notes that you were previously getting in the Gimone.
Yeah, I particularly get apricot from this, actually.
Mm-hmm. And when you're ready, take a sip. So this one almost feels more balanced.
There isn't a fluctuation in sort of flavor across as it floats across your palate. I feel like there's like a consistency of this one, which I would say the other one is sort of it plays with your tongue a little bit more.
Yeah.
Huh.
Absolutely.
This also, the sugar in this is higher, I would say. I guess I noticed that because I start salivating sooner after I take the sip, I feel like, which is a sugar or a salt factor.
Yep.
But they're very different, very different.
Yeah. It's astonishing how different two wines that for the longest time, before I really got into wine, I didn't think that you could have such a difference between wine from the same region. I always thought all champagne's the same. It's just different price points. But that's not the case at all. You have varying ages, you have varying grapes, different percentages, different carbonation levels. Premier Cru versus Grand Cru versus Viage. It's a whole.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm amazed. I have to say, I like them both. I like our first one a bit better. I like how it flirted with my tongue differently.
Yes.
That was really interesting. Let's talk about, for a second, we are talking about a particular region and particular grapes to that region. When I take a Pinot Noir or a Chardonnay grape and I grow it in Sonoma or Russian River, but the seed is from the Champagne region in France. What happens in that case? Sort of, how does that varietal come into being?
So because you're going across the world, the terroir, the dirt really, is just completely different. And also you're planting it, let's say someone did this in 2017, so 3 years ago. They planted champagne grapes in Sonoma. Sonoma makes great Chardonnay and great Pinot Noir, but it's very specific to their region about how the flavor profiles are going to be. You can pretty much assume that a Pinot Noir from Sonoma is going to be slightly more fruit forward. It's going to have a slight, and what I mean by fruit forward is it's not going to be sweet. It's still going to be a dry Pinot Noir, but it's going to have this more like medium to fuller bodied, almost like sugary coat because it's so fruity. Chardonnay, same kind of thing. And it's just because it's a warmer climate. It has a little bit more of a youth to it, or not even a little bit more, a significant youth to it.
Oh, yeah.
Grapes are planted in 2017 versus maybe 1917. So significant youth, and that can drastically change the wine. And then also, depending on whether they choose steel or oak, like I previously said, most champagne is made in steel barrels, but you can still do oak barrels. It'll just be very different flavor-wise. And a lot of California Chardonnays you tend to find in oak barrels. So it can easily be done. It's just, it won't taste like champagne.
Yeah,
it just
all about where it
no
goes.
way. Yeah.
Got it. Well, this was delicious and lovely. I want to talk about Little West Wines for a minute, talk about the neighborhood. Besides people taking entire handles of bourbon or vodka to the face over the past 8 months,
Yeah.
and I hope sales being pretty good, what trends have you noticed or spotted or learned about of recent, if you will?
Yeah. I've noticed that a lot of people are interested in trying new wines and spirits that they've never tried before.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah. They're open to something new. So I've seen people who are just like, I normally drink tequila, but I want to try mezcal. I'm just like, awesome. That is wildly different, even though it's made from the same agave plant.
Right.
So there's been that. And then also with wine too, people come in, they say, I always drink Pinot Noir, but I want to change it up. What can I do instead? So, and then I normally direct them to like a Grenache or a Grenache Syrah blend or so on and so forth. And that's been really awesome seeing people kind of branch out of their regular go-tos, because when you have a go-to, it's so comforting to just stick with that. So I think even though people are right now during the global pandemic have been searching for more consistency and more comfort and just wanting to feel like more at home while at home, they still want to branch out and try new things, which I didn't expect.
I think that's a really fascinating discovery in terms of like a willingness to try something new now, when a lot of us are just seeking that comfort that we know.
Yeah.
All right. What is your your preference as a Burgundy Pinot Noir? What about when it comes to a cocktail? I know we're talking about people's branching out of their go-to. What is your go-to cocktail?
Several. But but I think my most consistent go-to cocktail is just a classic martini. However, I like it a little bit different. I love a 50-50 gin martini.
That's old school.
It is old school.
I mean, we're talking like Bewitched when she would make the picture of martinis and it was 50-50. And yeah, wow, okay.
Yeah. So in an age where people are terrified of dry vermouth,
right,
which makes no sense because dry vermouth is lovely. It's fortified wine. So I love doing equal parts dry vermouth to gin, but then also changing gins too to get to these different botanical notes that each gin has to offer. And then sometimes I add orange bitters, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I do a lemon twist or a grapefruit twist. Sometimes I add an olive if I want it to be a little bit salty. So I take that variation of a martini and then just kind of branch off and kind of figure out what I'm feeling like in that moment.
I am on the floor because my friends make fun of me because I drink my martinis usually without vermouth. So basically it's just very cold vodka with a garnish. I prefer a Gibson, so a cocktail
Love
onion.
Gibson.
Or second to that would be a lemon twist for me. But I also, in COVID, I love gherkins, little cocktail pickles. So I'll make a dirty martini
all the time.
Yes. I will do that with gherkins, and it's really good with a cocktail onion and a gherkin.
Yes.
I'm a vodka drinker, but obviously, that's. I feel like the 50-50 would work better with gin because of the profile you get from gin.
It does not work with vodka. It doesn't. A little bit of vermouth will work with vodka, but 50-50 doesn't, because then all you're getting is the flavor of the vermouth, which is great too. But for someone who's specifically a vodka drinker, they don't want to taste primarily vermouth. Yeah. They want to taste primarily the vodka.
Correct.
So your preference of no vermouth, or even like an in and out.
Usually I'll pour some in and out, right? And dump it out.
Exactly.
Just wipe the glass. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally fine. Yeah, with gin's a little bit more harsher when it comes to different flavors that you're getting all at once. So I personally think that gin needs vermouth to open up and kind of showcase all of those different botanicals.
Okay. I feel like we're also, though this week has been the exception, for me, I'm approaching Manhattan season. I feel like I go from martinis in the summer to Manhattans in the winter.
Same.
What's the difference between a rye and a bourbon?
So bourbon is 51% corn in the mash bill, whereas rye is going to be 51% rye or more. So what that means is that with bourbon, you're getting a sweeter distilled spirit because corn is the primary ingredient used. And in rye, you're getting something a little bit spicier because rye is the primary ingredient used.
Uh-huh.
Which is why a Manhattan is classically made with rye whiskey, so that it dries out the sweet vermouth that's being used.
So that's where the balance comes from in there.
Exactly. You can still have a bourbon Manhattan, but it will be a touch on the sweeter side.
Yeah. That the logic there just makes so much sense, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, you are also the owner of the Cocktail Parlor. Tell us
Yes.
about this, please.
Yeah. So I started the Cocktail Parlor 5 years ago, about 5.5 years ago, when I was 22, 23. And I just started baking with alcohol. So I've always worked in cocktail bars. So I was taking all of these cocktails that I love and I was turning them into baked goods. And it got to the point where a couple cocktail bars were just like, we're definitely putting you on the dessert menu. Like, these are awesome and they're boozy. And yeah, so that's kind of where the idea came from.
Okay.
And the pandemic definitely changed my outlook a bit because I unfortunately lost my industrial kitchen. So I wasn't able to bake anymore, at least not for orders. I could bake for myself, obviously, in my home kitchen, but I couldn't accept any orders. So I lost my kitchen. I also lost out on several events that I do on an annual basis between International Women's Day and really March is basically International Women's Month for all of the different events surrounding that. Whiskey Washback, Whiskey Live, Whiskey Fest, Jazz Age Lawn Party, all of these events were canceled. So I just looked at my budget and I looked at everything else that I do and I was just like, I need something that is shelf stable. I need to still create something that showcases everything I love about this industry, but has a shelf life longer than 2 days. So
Yeah.
So I started candle making and I created candles inspired by same thing, classic and modern cocktails. They do have a little bit of alcohol in each candle and for example, one of the candles I make is called a Rob Rose, which is based off of this awesome Scotch-based kind of like Rob Roy old-fashioned variation. So it's basically smoky Scotch, some kind of sweet vermouth or Amaro Chiacharo with rose water.
Oh, wow.
It's phenomenal. It originated at Dear Irving by Tom Richter.
Wow.
And I was just like, this needs to be the first candle. It's like smoky Scotch and rose, and it's beautiful to smell as a cocktail. So I can only imagine as a candle, it's going to be awesome. So I started with that one, and I use Lagavulin 16-year Scotch whiskey for that one, which is an Isla Scotch. So it has traditional smoke to it already. And yeah, it's a very floral, very smoky, very whiskey-based candle. And even though I always tell people, even though it has alcohol in it, it burns perfectly safely. It's fine. It won't burn your
You're
house.
not going to get a...
No, it's not going to spark. It's okay.
All right. That's amazing. And we can get these at Little West Wines, right?
Yes, you can get all the scents that are out right now at Little West Wine and Spirits.
So you can come in for a bottle for yourself and leave with a candle for yourself or for somebody else.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I love it. Congrats on all of that.
Thank you.
You know, I'm not a big gin drinker, but maybe I'm going to try this 50-50. I think the other issue is some vermouth just isn't as good as others.
That's true.
Too many people are used to this Martini and Ross vermouth, and that is sort of very standard, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Martini and Rossi make a lot of different variations of vermouth, and some just aren't meant for martinis. Some are meant for more highball variations where you're adding club soda.
Okay.
So I personally really love Dolan vermouth.
Another bartender friend of mine recommends Dolan also.
It's great, and it's the same price point pretty much. It's like $17-18 for a bottle.
Got it.
And I will say you should always keep your vermouth in the fridge.
Because
it's still wine. It's fortified wine, so it needs to stay chilled. If it stays out on the shelf or at your or at the bar, it'll just go bad after some time.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Well, I have a couple of fire round questions for you, so we can just learn a little bit more about Courtney, just a little bit. Even though now we know your cocktail preferences, we know your champagne and wine preferences. I just have a couple more questions so we can unpack
let me
about you.
let me just take a sip.
Step up. So don't be scared.
Okay.
If you are going to have a drink, are you having a cocktail or a glass of wine?
Me personally?
Yeah, this is you.
Wine.
And would you rather enjoy this at a sidewalk cafe or at a rooftop bar?
Sidewalk cafe.
And when you're doing that, is your next stop a night at the theater or a visit to the museum?
Oh, nah, night at the theater.
All right, which we'll get back to someday.
Yes.
And then daytime, are you doing a beach visit or a park picnic?
Park picnic.
All right. And I think I know the answer to this, but just more on the booze theme, white wine or red wine?
Red wine.
Yeah. All year round red wine?
Yes.
Will you ever chill that Burgundy Pinot Noir, or that's just room temperature for you?
Depends on what producer I have.
I love it. See, everybody has answers to these very niche questions that are really fun to know about and understand.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for joining us today. And thank you for keeping the neighborhood fortified and lubricated throughout these times. We love having you guys here. And thank you all for joining us today on another episode of Meatpacking Unpacked. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay tuned to hear from the district and the city's cast of characters across the cultural, political, and business spectrums. We'll see you all next week.
Cheers.